I'm going to call the meeting of the Affordable Housing Trust Board to order. It's Wednesday, April 3rd, 2019, and we're in the Skakit Room of the Orleans Town Hall. And we are now on air and we're live. So our events are going to be out in the public. So straighten your tie, brush your hair, and watch out. Yes, you're on. Back of your head, Fran. We have about 25 minutes here before the full members of the Housing Committee join us. And there are a couple of things that I want to go through at the trust level. First thing is approval of the minutes of March 6, 2019.
I move that we approve the minutes of March 6, 2019, subject to the correction on page 2, paragraph 5 of 15 bedrooms, talking about the Cape Cod Village project, when it's actually 16 bedrooms. And that wasn't the problem. In speaking to that, it wasn't our recorder who made that mistake, but I think it was a misprint from somewhere that somebody picked up. I worked on the project both with regard to the permitting and also to writing the zoning opinion letter. So it's 16 bedrooms.
Okay.
Subject to that correction, I move that they be approved.
Okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, not voting? Greg is not here. Okay. The second item on our agenda is 18 West Road Housing Unit. We had discussed this at our last meeting. It was an affordable unit that could have lost its affordability if we didn't do some things. And George, could you fill us in on what has happened? The good news first.
Housing Assistance Corporation found a buyer. The person is fully qualified and in the queue for closing, working with attorneys right now. They do not anticipate any issue that's going to stop the resale to an income qualified buyer. And the better news is the extra funding that you authorized at your last meeting didn't need to be used because it was Hack that found the buyer.
Okay, so we saved it without spending any money. Is that what you're saying?
But you protected yourselves.
Okay, good.
Oh,
Yes,
Mr.
do
Chairman, when is this closing supposed to take place?
I'm not sure. I thought it was early May.
Okay.
As you know, closings are
Yes.
fluid.
Okay, the third item on our agenda I've added is a discussion about whether or not this trust should go to a bank and see if we could get a line of credit. Now, the reason I put this on is we sit here and we know that we get $275,000 a year by town meeting action, and I think I noted last time that the Department of Revenue has decided that this requires an action by town meeting every year, as does the OPED $450,000. So you'll see it on the warrant, but it should be something that's automatic and should be on our consent agenda fairly soon. So the thought is that if we have a guaranteed stream from the tax side of the world, and we know that we get $275,000 a year, would it be advantageous for us to see if we could get a line of credit with a bank so that if something came up during the period, even between town meeting, not that we have to go to town meeting all the time, but we would have the ability to act faster than we might otherwise. I've reviewed this with Mike Ford, who says we're certainly eligible to do that. I reviewed it with John Kelly, and John Kelly and then Mike Ford noted that because it deals with public money, we would have to have an RFP to go out and see which banks would like to extend that line of credit and at what rate. So it's not something that we would necessarily use, but it would be a nice thing to have in our basket of tricks, we'll call it. The other thing that I looked at, which relates to this in some way, is the Community Preservation Committee has been voted to approve new debt for two possible acquisitions on the town meeting this May. One, an acre on Lonnie's Pond, and the other is a community conservation restriction on Simpson Island. And that caused me to look at the Community Preservation Committee, and if we go ahead with those, we will bond them, and we will have a total debt on the Community Preservation Committee of a little over, a little under $3 million. When the Community Preservation Committee and Act came to Orleans in 2006, it came with debt from the land bank of about $9 million. So it did occur to me, and this is not for action here, that if we ever got in a situation where we needed more capital than what we might have from a line of credit, it would be possible for, and this would take town meeting action, of course, the Community Preservation Committee to vote to provide additional funds. And if it was project-specific, they could bond it. And there's a capacity in the Community Preservation Fund right now of probably another $6 million of money that could be used for housing. So I have to be working on something else, and I wanted the trust to understand that. So not that, again, we'd have to use it, but it's nice to know what we have for resources. So, thoughts about line of credit from anybody?
Is that committee funded through taxes?
That committee receives its money through a 3% surtax on property taxes here. So they generate about $1 million, $1.1 million every year. And they have the ability to spend that money on affordable housing, open space, and historic preservation and recreation. And they must spend 10% on the first three, affordable housing, open space, and historic preservation. And ever since it was created, the debt that they had more than made up for the 10% for conservation. And since that, they've spent most of the remainder, well, 54% of the remainder for affordable housing, actually. So the idea is that if we wanted or we needed something that we didn't have through our normal assemblage of capital, we could go to them. But it would take a town meeting action. We can't do it independently. So, other thoughts from anybody?
Line of credit, why not?
Yeah, well, that's where I was too, but,
You know, I don't know if it was before or after you left, when we were talking about the motel
yes.
last meeting, you know, something like that could come into play, where you're not tying up funds and you're basically putting a hold on something until the sewers or whatever has to happen to work out.
Any other thoughts? Greg?
Based on our current situation, how much would the line of credit be? I mean, how much could we, or
Well,
right now?
so we have $1 million, on July 1st, we'll have about $1.25 million in the bank, unless something comes up between now and then. But we have this stream of $275,000 a year. So, I think you could probably get a line of credit of $2 million, maybe more, depending on how far you wanted to go and what the bank wanted to do. Thought came, I had been involved in an earlier housing trust, and they had less resources than we do, and a local bank gave them a $3 million line of credit because they wanted to focus and help them with housing. And in that case, the bank was involved in the process of buying and preserving houses, and every time they got to 10, they'd sell the mortgage to the state, so they'd get their money back again. So it was working capital. But Dewey, any thoughts?
No,
Good idea?
I'm indifferent.
Okay. Just, so if we want to do it, if somebody wants to move it, I will start the process, and That doesn't mean we have to take it, but let's find out what the market offers.
There is one thing, didn't Mr. Johnson have a comment with regard to that during our last meeting, that inasmuch as he's in the banking
Banking
business, he was going to kind of give us an informal report with regard to, so, subject to that input.
Okay, I did see him socially within the last week. Tried this out. I think if he were here, he would say it's a good idea, but I can't speak for him. So if you want to start the process, we don't have to accept it, but we can start it and see what the market has to bear.
I move that we start the process of obtaining a line of credit as a feasibility.
Okay. Second somewhere? Further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, not voting? Okay, we'll start that process. The fourth item on our agenda, the Community Preservation Committee does prepare a CPC plan, and it has a housing element in it. And I think Myra sent something to all of you that refers to the Housing Trust and what this just describes what we do. And this was an opportunity for anybody on this committee to add anything to that. It's just a statement of where we are and what we do. And the rest of the document describes how the Community Preservation Committee acts through its plan, so. If there are no comments or changes, we'll let the Community Preservation Committee know, and this will be published as done. Hello, Ward, come in. Okay, now, the other thing, Henry Brem sent out a nice summary of some housing discussion points, and I thought we might spend a few minutes reviewing those. Henry, you want to just speak to begin,
Yeah, so
or add anything?
I preempted by saying I have no government experience other than being successful getting money from the government.
Well, that doesn't hurt. So now you're on the other side of the table giving it away, huh?
But I felt towards the end of last meeting that we had a good discussion, and maybe we even did a brainstorming how two people work together. But I felt we were a little all over the place about the strategy. And I looked at this from a couple different perspectives. So, who needs affordable housing? The teacher, she's not here today, right? The EMT, the year-round laborer, welder, carpenter. Some would, like to own a house someday, right, at a reasonable cost. We don't have many of them in Orleans. Some will never be able to own a house someday because they can't get enough credit from the bank or whatever it is. And what I heard in that discussion was, well, the most efficient way, and I'm not a builder, is obviously mostly unit buildings, I get that. Yet that doesn't give the teacher or the EMT a three-bedroom house for his family or her family of four. And so we started to get into that, and we ran out of time, and we said, well, let's not miss an opportunity, or what about this, what about that, and I'm afraid that if we have too many priorities, we won't get many of them done. And then I heard, and I don't remember who said this, he said, well, let's get one done to show the community. And then there was the other discussion about, is the community of, when we were talking about a couple of properties, well, the community would never go with that, they never approve it. And I thought, well, maybe we have to market this need to the community, And I believe that takes more than standing up at the town meeting, because once people hear what they came to hear for, whether it was, marijuana or whatever, they leave. And if you end up in, let's say in the third inning, of the town meeting, you could be preaching to the choir, not the people who really need to buy into this. And, you know, I've done informal discussion, but and you hear the complaints, well, how come the restaurant's closed on Monday, right? Or how come this, or how come that, you know? But we all don't really understand why. And it's not that we don't take the time, it's just it's not marketed to us in that way. And, you know, the local papers do a great job, but most of the papers, you know, if you look at articles across the country on affordable housing, they're being attacked. The different groups are being attacked, and they're not necessarily looking for solutions, so the people that are responsible for the solutions have their backs against the wall. So I guess a long-winded way of saying, what is our strategy, and then put together a plan and put the money against, or the budget against that plan, and of course a timeline, and that equals a business plan. And then what are, you know, our strategies for money? I mean, do we want to limit ourselves to the money in the bank or the money that's coming through? Do we want to go outside and find outside money? Do we want to do like conservation does, and start marketing to state attorneys and say, hey, we're here, if somebody wants to donate their property at the appropriate time? Some or all of the above. So I just put that out there.
Okay. Other thoughts? Ward, you had also submitted some things for discussion, and want to just follow up here?
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
And just, remind people, we're live, so
Okay.
we need to speak loudly so that the public can hear us and our recording administrative assistant can get the minutes later. Go ahead.
Well, I appreciated Henry's, pushing this topic and his outline of some things. And I also have to apologize for being a little bit late. I just believe that you get where you're going when you set it out as a direction and you aim for it. And I don't feel that our trust board has been able to, in the midst of sort of going up the learning curve, that we've been able to really dig in on what our goals are. I'm very impressed by the work that was done by the Affordable Housing Committee and George, and I've worked my way through that large housing committee report. I don't, it's in a way I think we should definitely start from those goals that were laid out. But I also am not sure that I completely understand them. And there are implications of those goals having to do with rental versus ownership, having to do with density versus, single family. There's been some good thinking on that. I want to get it under my belt. And I think there are some sleeper topics that have to do with resistance to affordable housing that we should be proactively and positively addressing. And I'm with you on the question of his fundraising and public relations, part of our mandate, and shouldn't we be doing that? So I'm a voice of support. And I guess I would like us to identify a process whereby we set our goals.
Okay. Other thoughts on this subject?
I think, having the goals and the strategies to meet those goals, but I do think we gotta put some numbers against them, and whether that's, and, when you ask what the committee, the Affordable Housing Committee comes in, is, okay, the need is X, so we need 75% rentals, 25% single-family homes, and then we go at that. So when someone says, well, let's go look at that home or that go, and we don't spend time on things that aren't gonna help us meet the short-term and medium term goals and needs.
Yeah, just chiming in here, I'm looking at my watch, trying to get to 4:30, because I think this discussion will continue at 4:30.
Oh, I thought, geez, these guys really moved fast on that agenda. They were already at 4:30.
So, but I think, sort of, as a trust member, we're sort of coming into this process fairly late. You know, the Affordable Housing Committee, and George has been on this for, George, maybe 20 years now. Don't want to date you, but nevertheless, you've been here.
Accurately.
So there's an incredible knowledge over here at the left-hand side of the table and commitment from members on the committee. And we're coming in saying, basically, you know, we've got some tools that the rest of you haven't had for a while. And I think part of what has to happen here is collectively, we need to understand how the committee can take advantage of our tools, and we, as people who are interested in housing from a variety of different perspectives, can work with the committee to say, hey, did you ever think about why? And one of the reasons I had the line of credit on here was, nobody's ever talked about that before, but that's another tool that we may have in our toolkit. Clearly, there are a number of goals that have been set forth in the housing study, you know, done by the committee, done by George, approved by the committee and George and everybody, and that's sort of our starting point. A lot of work has been done, and I think the question that collectively, committee and trust need to figure out is, how do we prioritize the opportunities that we may have? And when we get into the next agenda here in a couple of minutes, George will give us an update on things that we have talked about in the last month or two. And we'll see that some have left the station already and so forth, which will, something that we need to keep track of, because sometimes something comes up fast and we need to act. And
Well, I
so,
mean, a plan is
yeah.
is a launching pad. It's not necessarily a set of handcuffs.
Okay. So with that, Katie, do you want to come up and share us at this table? Sure. And others, please come to the table, because we're live today, and so everything you say is going on the air as soon as you say it. So members of the committee, bring your chairs up and join us. I hate to be in a situation where we're sitting here seemingly in charge because we're behind the bigger table.
Alan, did we work through 2, 3, and 4?
We did, yeah.
Okay.
So, you want to go down, Katie?
Yeah,
Watch
really
out.
high, like really high.
Watch out.
Okay.
And there's another seat here if somebody, or one right here. We just come right up.
No comments.
So Katie, do you want to convene your committee?
Yeah, we're at 4:30, I think.
Yep.
We convene the joint Affordable Housing Committee meeting with the trust. I think everybody's here that I'm expecting. You're ready to get started?
Okay. First item on our joint agenda is goals and priorities, which we already have hit a little bit, but maybe you'd like to share with us some of the goals and priorities that you have been working on that would help your bankers understand things.
Sure. I mean, I think the majority of what we spent doing since our last meeting was more talking about the coordination of activities, but at the same time, we did review the comments that were made at this meeting, which was, 3 primary goals: rentals, land for ownership to donate to affordable housing, and then there was the single-family rental option that didn't really get flushed out. I think those are the ideal goals. I think they're consistent with the housing study. Personally, I think using the goals set forth, or the, I guess I'm missing the word I'm looking for, but suggested goals from the study, which was, 100 units, 85 being rental, the others being ownership possibilities, I think is where we should start.
Okay.
And it's
Henry?
Not, I read your study a little while ago, but is that, can we break that down, not today, by year? So we don't, so we can recruit that police officer because we have a place for him to,
Sure.
because someone said there was a rule of how close you had to live to.
Sure, the housing study had a recommendation of, that the town would take direct responsibility for developing 100 units over a 10-year period, of which 85% would be rental units.
I got that. Now I'm
Correct.
asking, should we break it down by year? Or we may not have that house for that family if we're not gonna get the house until year 10.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I mean, I think the only challenge with breaking it down further than that is when you're looking at a project like Cape Cod 5. I mean, that's gonna be 50 rental units right out the gate, but it's all gonna come at one time. So I'm not sure exactly how you wanna break it down more than that. Or,
Yeah. From my experience, if you look at the opportunities and let the opportunities run your business, it eventually backs up to you. You know, you gotta have a plan and then look at opportunities to fit your plan.
Well, and it seems to me we could also, instead of year by year, do it in, 3 chunks or
Right.
something like that. So that if this is the priority, then what do we think is a reasonable
Yeah,
expectation?
I just got one ear out to that police chief and the fire chief, I don't remember who said, we can't recruit anybody, we don't have a place for them to live. And I think we missed it, we ignored those discussions.
yeah, and I'm not opposed to making a more, objective timeline. I wouldn't know where to start to do it. So I guess we would probably look to your experience and kind of directing that conversation.
Alan, if I may-
Yes, George?
Just so you know, that the community housing study was focused on people who make 80% or less of area median income, depending on household size. I think, Henry, what you're talking about a lot of people who are above that 80% line, for which there is presently no housing program in the town whatsoever. But there is absolutely a need. I mean, there's a huge supply side need just for units in general, whether they're affordable or attainable or workforce, however you want to couch that. Really a small way. So maybe you need to flesh out whether your goals are entirely focused on that affordable, capital A affordable, less than 80% of income, or it's a broader population that we're looking to serve for other purposes.
I didn't know that those did fall in.
Yes, Ward?
Assuming am I correct that the community housing phrase in our chart refers to this kind of band of housing that you're discussing? You just pointed
Let me look at your chart. It's a little,
Ours is low and moderate and community.
in community. So community housing, as defined by the CPC, goes up to 100%
100%.
of area median income, up to the average.
Does that mean that we should not aim at the 125 or 150%?
You could certainly adjust this charge as you wanted to. But, what we're finding, and you hear from the Housing Authority Director, things like that, if you stay only below the 80% line, you get a narrow band of people in the community seeking housing, but you're not really serving the fuller, the broader housing needs. And of course, if you do a project with state money, then the state prescribes the income levels and the variety of bedroom sizes that are required.
Just to follow, is that community definition actually some kind of an adopted definition?
It is in the Community Preservation
Statute,
Act,
yeah.
in the statute. yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So does that preclude developing properties with units up to 120% of AMI?
I don't know. You have to flesh that out.
I think I don't think it precludes that, because you would use creative financing in the whole package so that maybe some of the units had to go over 100 in order to support those that were 80 or less, kind of thing, so. Or you had to use some other financing to make it work.
And you would apportion that financing towards the project.
Oh, I see. You might not, our contribution would represent support for the affordable end, and there could be
Yeah.
others, maybe even fundraising.
Well, it strikes
Do
me,
we-
listening to this, that there are different tranches of potential users of our services. That is, if the fireman can't, I mean, I'm assuming that the fireman makes more than 80% of the median income for the, so I heard something recently on the radio about the fact that in the hotter markets, a person who is on the median income can't buy a median house the way they're priced today. So, I mean, this is a nationwide problem. But to come back to Orleans, we've got the person who's the barista at Chocolate Sparrow, we've got the firemen, and we've got people in between. All of those people have needs, and the town needs to be able to serve all of those. So the problem becomes more complex, which is, well, who are we really trying to help? Is it more important to have a barista, or more appropriately asked, we should serve all of these, ideally?
Other thoughts on the, Alexis, welcome.
Thank you.
Just get off the water?
We did not go out today.
A little windy?
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman,
Yeah.
the only point that I would tag team on Dewey's comment with is that I'm not aware of any program that supports presently those from 80% to 120%. That population is completely unserved by any program as I'm aware, and that from 80% down, there are multiple programs serving that spectrum. So just one piece to consider when we decide.
You know, it's ironic that Massachusetts got into its own affordable housing program in the early 70s when it created the Massachusetts Housing Finance Agency. And the model was very simple. You build a development, 75% of the units were at market, and they subsidized 25%. And it was public money that went to do that. And you had to be a nonprofit or limited dividend and so forth. And as time has gone on, you know, the rules and regulations have changed. So now we're in a situation where if we did something at Cape Cod 5, for example, the sweet spot is 50 units, and somebody's going to use tax credits and everything else, and it's going to be dictated exactly what you're going to be able to rent those units for. And I think what I'm hearing here is that may not be everything that we want to do here. And, you know, we talk about firefighters and teachers and others. When you have a chance, take a look at the salaries of the firefighters that are published in the annual report. Because they all are on overtime. And I don't think most of the firefighters would actually qualify for any of the housing we're talking about doing, which is sort of an interesting twist. Base salary, yes, but take-home salary pushes them out. So I think we need to be creative here and not get boxed in by the formula, because there's clearly a need in this town and in any town that, beyond the formula.
That's why the strategy and balance should be in there, so we are looking in those directions and we're not looking too wide.
Yep.
You know, I guarantee there's no affordable housing in Beverly Hills. What Mr. Trump doesn't know is that most of the workers are coming over from south of the border.
Yeah, right.
But there is affordable housing in East LA. So in here, being in a relatively rural or low population community, how far can they go to get affordable housing? And then you insert those rules for police and firemen. I don't know if anyone else, they have to live there, and it screws you up. It screws it up. You know, it really does. You know, so we've got to make sure we stay. You know, we don't have Comcast and have 170 channels. I think we'll be all over the place. We won't get a lot done. We need three or four channels at most.
So Alan, though,
Yeah, Dewey.
isn't it fair to say that some of the money that comes to us, or the money that comes to us automatically, has to be used for affordable housing? That is up to 80%.
No, community up to 100%
Up to 100%.
in the charter, yes.
So basically, if you want to do up to 120%, it would have to be from private funds or other fundraising.
How you finance the operation. You know, and I don't think there's anything that would prohibit housing at greater than 100%, but we couldn't spend our money to finance those units,
Right,
okay? I
right.
mean,
Yep,
that's-
no, I'm following you, which
Yeah.
is, which may get us to, one of the questions was asked is, should we do private fundraising? And I think the answer is yes.
Yeah,
But to your point, we took that Cape Cod 5 building, whatever. This committee could fund the lower income units, but if it was a private manager, the other ones could be, the deal could be made to say, hey, we'll subsidize these as long as you have these at the 120%, whatever.
Yeah,
That-
so-
that area correctly?
yeah, so let's use that as an entree, because in the second item on this agenda, we happen to have the Cape Cod 5 Operations Center, and you people had the committee had a presentation on it within the last 2 weeks, and there's a lot of work going on there, and Henry, it's interesting that maybe there's a way you could bifurcate the financing to achieve two things on that site, but, I don't know, Katie or George?
I think I'll let George take that one.
Sure. Do you have a comment?
Ward?
First?
Well, I'm not sure what, can we establish a process to work on these goals? And I can see, having an agenda item that has more time in another meeting. I can see a collaborative joint kind of process that would involve the Affordable Housing Committee as well as us. Or I can see a small subcommittee who would work in consultation and get something on paper that then this committee could chew on.
Okay.
Those are options. There may be others.
So our next meeting will be May 2nd in this room, and maybe Katie and I can touch base and put something together so that that's the focus of the agenda
Sure.
on May 2nd. Take what the work that's been done, remind everybody where it is in the report that everybody's received, and we'll have a discussion on, let's really take those things apart and see if we all agree in how we should use them. 100 units, 10 years, 85% rental, what does it mean and how do you do it?
Well, I thought also in the report, there was emphasis on, I wrote 4 of them, home ownership, 15% starting
Yep.
units. A consideration for handicap accessibility
Right.
and a mix of seniors and families. And maybe this is not, or maybe it is under our bailiwick of home improvement programs, including de-letting and
Yep.
septic repairs. And those could be shuffled under some of the
Sure,
bigger
sure.
goals, but I would like to see I think we can build recognition and support by having a big tent, and saying that we're trying to help a variety of people. We do have votes coming to continue funding. We do have an image to worry about in the town, and so I'd be looking for an umbrella type.
Why doesn't that be the focus of our next joint meeting? Okay?
Fair enough.
George, why don't you go ahead, just
Yeah, just
summary.
the agenda. Yeah, just run through some of the things. Well, with Cape Cod 5, I mean, the committee was all here, chime in if I say something untoward. We had Brown, Lindquist, Fiduciano, Raber, give a kickoff meeting for their study. They're going to look at the property, the Cape Cod 5 Operations Center, plus the little dog-leg property that gets up over 3 acres. They're gonna look at 3 things, a use of the building and the 29 units that were sort of estimated to be appropriate in that building, whether that's a good number, and flesh that out. Look at adding some additional units either attached to the building or elsewhere on the site, and the site looks great on paper, but when you get there, it's a little, it's not as much elbow room as you might hope. And then we've also asked them to look at a max build and question whether 29 units in 36,000 square feet under roof is really the number for the building itself. As you saw in the study, there's a tremendous need for one-bedroom units. I was talking to a builder today who builds a modicum of apartments wherever he can fit one in. And he says he's got a list of 36 people looking for one-bedroom units that he just maintains. You know, so there is a need for the one-bedrooms, there's a need for the easy entry. That's what people don't find.
And what was the term for the smaller units, the smaller
Studio?
micro units? It was something
Yeah.
along those lines that he floated the idea of maybe doing some of those in like the 300-400 square foot. That would be affordable too.
Yeah, incidentally, Todd Thayer, when he was talking to the planning board a couple of years ago, was talking about a 450 to 500 square foot unit as a very marketable entity. So maybe he built some of those eventually. We did talk about a couple of the needs on the property, you know, laundry on site, storage somewhere. Storage becomes a big issue by the third year. We are Americans after all.
That's why you move every two, you know.
Right. So the architect will be working directly with Laura Schufelt on a project pro forma. Prior to that, they're going to deliver to the Affordable Housing Committee a handful of what they think are smart options that a developer could respond to and work through those three options and see what is best. I think when we have those three options and the Housing Committee has some direction that they think is appropriate, maybe we share those with you and keep the trust board on the how do you get it done level as opposed to the sort of initial project development. That seems like an appropriate cutoff, at least in my mind. So they will be checking in with the Housing Committee again on May 1st, and all systems are go for that. Any questions?
Yeah, George, what's the anticipated date of the release of the study?
I think it's around
June
June. It was
4.
like 60 days from commencement, so it's pretty quick. And we have 6 months under the letter of intent with Cape Cod 5 as an exclusive study.
From that date?
From the date that we signed the letter of intent, which was early March. So
Yeah.
I think we have till like late August.
This says 6/4 is when they would, estimated completion of the study.
And then we'll have 2 months
was
before the
90
letter
days,
of intent expires, we can negotiate with the Cape Cod 5 for further action.
What's the price on the property?
It's priceless right now. It's assessed at $4.9 million, but it's somewhat of a commercial white elephant, I think.
I will say as a point of clarification, I did, at our last meeting, we had said, we're all assuming the building was going to be staying there, and I said I wasn't taking off the table of removing the building if that was cost effective. It doesn't look like that's cost effective, so we'll go back to that building, most likely staying there.
So what happens is, when the period runs out, whenever that is, end of August, what happens at that point is that the bank lists the property for sale, that is, puts it on the market.
Prior to that date, we would try to negotiate a phase 2 agreement with Cape Cod 5 to take it a little bit further, so that we could think about putting out an RFP or structuring a project that actually worked. And this is kind of unique. We have a bank that has statutory requirements for community reinvestment, so they want to work with the town, and they're very interested in working with the town. I don't think they're counting the days until their obligation to Orleans runs out.
Mhm. Well, I think they continue to have that, the wealth management office across the street, so.
Yes, that will be there, right?
I did happen to see the president of the bank within the last week, and we didn't have a lengthy conversation, but she said, "Thank you for your interest." Because I have a feeling that a $3 billion mutual savings bank on Cape Cod wants to work to get rid of a non-performing asset. And Henry, I think one of the reasons I wanted to go to this subject was that site, the first look is, I got a building that has 3 floors and 37,000 square feet of space. Can we convert it to housing? But the second question is, let's put that on the back burner for a while and see what else you might do on the site. Because when you talk to developers who are in this business, the sweet spot is 50 units for tax credits and things like that. So Brown Lindquist is going to look at that So we have a range of options, and,
And I wouldn't rule out, could be apartments and it could be condos.
oh, sure, they're all, yeah,
Ownership.
yeah.
I think the direction that's being studied is a rental program, and Mass Housing Partnership only funds rentals. So that's what Laura Schufeld up there in Boston will be looking at for us. But it doesn't mean we have to accept that study as the end-all when it's done.
And George, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the way that we left it was we were basically asking them for what a max build would look like. And when we say max build, within building limit heights and everything like that, not max build. And then something on the lower end of what the 29 units that they had originally, and maybe trying to find something in the middle, so we sort of had an idea of what the ends were and finding something that might be suitable.
Were there two max build scenarios, one within the existing walls and then one just for the whole property?
It was all for the whole property.
Okay.
For the max build, I just mean, they were limited only by how high do you want the building to go? And we basically said where it's at, within this current zoning.
It's one of those ultra sensitivities under zoning, whereas some, density, when you're already at 8 or 10 units per acre, to jump to 12 may not be a make or break issue.
But he is certainly looking at the entire property.
What about the septic limitations of the site, though? I mean,
The
this,
study assumes access to public sewers.
so that necessarily limits the time period.
Yeah, in a tax credit project, once you've applied and are accepted into the program, it's Penrose up there in Eastham was a 24-month waiting period till they got the go-ahead. Charlie Adams, I talked to him the other day, he said that was lightning fast for a project, so 2 or 3 years is the general.
So talking about sewer, if the town meeting and the voters vote on the 13th and the 21st to go ahead, construction on the sewer collection system and the plant will be beginning right about now, next year. And that system will be begin to go online within 2 years. And the plan is to tie in Old Colony, downtown Orleans, and probably West Road early, because the system will be there, and you can start the plant running, and then as you move further north, that can be the system will be built, but it will be longer to tie in. So you're talking 2022 to 2023, we're at 19, 2.5 years for tax credits, all of a sudden you're at 22 and a half. It adds up, and so it's not unreasonable.
Is the main pipe going down West Road, though?
Yeah, a main pipe is going down West Road, that's correct.
Does that mean that this property is, once that is flowing, instantly tappable into that?
Yes, yeah, it'll be tapped as the pipe goes by. And the only thing that decides when the flow's turned on is what happens on the Cape Cod 5 side of the property line, okay?
But you could theoretically retrofit those apartments or whatever they're gonna be ready to go.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
And there's a long permitting process too, which is part of something like this.
Mr. Chairman, go ahead. I see to Ward, he had his hand up before I did.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Moderator.
I'll shut up now.
His graciousness is driving the question out of my mind. But I'm kind of late to this planning, but I'm wondering whether while the construction of the sewer is going on, is there possibility for things along the lines of attaching to gas, is gas available to that, or burying utilities, those sorts of things?
Gas is there, I'm pretty sure, and it may be, the building may have it now, I don't remember.
I think National Grid twisted our arm to get carte blanche to put in larger gas mains on Cape Cod, and so I think that's going to be successfully accomplished.
Good. Well, that's affordability too.
Right.
Do we?
Well, a couple of things. It seems to me that is an opportunity of substantial proportions. I'm not sure I grasp the breadth of it. But we have a willing seller, we have a need for a particular thing. We're waiting until we get a study out. Is there anything that we can do in anticipation of what the study might show us with regard to maximum density and also the cost of rehabbing it. I mean, we're working on it in the meantime so that we can hit the ground running once we have that information. And the second thing about that is, George, don't we need to have some kind of a zoning study to ascertain what the total capacity of that would be?
I think we're, on this study, we're beyond zoning as a limitation. Since it's going to be at least 25% affordable housing, a 40B option is always out there.
Okay,
Presumably a friendly 40B, so whether the town is at 10% or just below it, it could still be employed. But I think that the 29 units certainly is under the zoning cap in that area. If you do include some one-bedroom units, you can get up to 12 units per acre. That's 3.2 or 3.4. So you get around 42 units under zoning on that site as a potential. So if it has to climb up to 50, as I talked to the Penrose guy, he said 50 is the spot they look for, unless there are a lot of other financial factors that are in play, such as, you know, the town conveys land that already has a building that's considered an asset, not a detriment. But, so the 42 to 50 is a reasonable number, so 42 by zoning, higher than that by 40B.
So walk us through how this would work, so this committee or the town could acquire the property, developer could come into play, developer would purchase the property at a reduced rate, obviously, right?
Yeah, I'd like to actually back you off to the first thing you said. So maybe we can structure this in a way that the town facilitates the developer to purchase the property from Cape Cod 5 with a set of performance criteria. And then the town and the bank somehow make the property available at an advantageous cost, because there's probably some asset on the property. You're not just gonna tear the building down. The town never enters into chain of title, and when the project is done, it's managed by a management entity that owns it, such as a Penrose or some other.
So I'm gonna just put a slight hiccup. The town, or not the town, or this committee, in order for the bank to get a substantial contribution tax deduction, can't do that if he turns it over to a construction developer. So the town, somewhere along the line, the nonprofit.
So you need a charitable gift to be made
Well, I looked
somewhere.
at that
Yeah.
law. I think
Yep.
we reviewed it, we would comply with it, and somehow some charitable entity has to take.
Yeah,
To protect the bank from being gracious and giving the property away, which you promised will happen.
what's that they'll give the property to us? I promise that. But it'd be nice. I think you have to balance whatever that charitable gift is with the benefit of the CRA credits that the bank gets. I know nothing about CRA credits. I don't know. Tom, do you have any idea what is required or how they work?
I don't.
So that's further work.
It shows up in their federal review, is how it works. You've either done it or you don't. I don't know how they calculate it, but
Does it look like a tax credit versus a tax deduction?
it's part of the, I think the CRA is part of the Fair Housing Act or something. It's been a while since I was in
So there's
there.
not a dollar value attached. It's more of a, you gotta get over the hurdle.
What have you done that's good lately for affordable housing?
Any good government requirement, I don't think there's a lot of clarity of exactly.
You'll know if you break it.
Yeah.
On the planning process, you mentioned that there was an initial kind of hearing or group, sense of the group with the committee, and that you thought there would be, the committee would focus as the kind of collaborator with the architects. And then, so the two questions I had were, has the bank, do they have an individual or a small team who are focusing on this? Do we have any advantage in having the architect speak with the bank or getting them looped in early? Or are they just waiting for us to come and delight them with a great proposal?
I think it is mostly the latter. I don't think there's any benefit to having the bank involved in the study for what the community wants for housing there. I think they're pretty open to, we all know the needs are basically the same. We've talked about up and down, the income ladder, but I think they're very open to whether the town would want to do anything on that side.
Uh-huh. And then the second question was, are the architects looking at architect stuff, or are they also looking at the kind of purchasing model and the financing
Yeah,
model?
they're looking at the site and what can be put on the site from, below the ground up.
Yes,
And then that information will be coordinated with Laura Schufelt and Mass Housing Partnership,
okay.
who has some capacity to program in the various funding sources into an overall project that works financially. So that's our method of getting this one done for $25,000.
Well, it sounds like Laura Schufeld's a person who might want to talk with this group.
Absolutely.
Yes.
When the time is right.
Mhm.
Okay,
Before we
Yeah.
hop to the next one?
Yeah, sure, Katie.
That just, so May 2nd was obviously, I think we need to
May
talk
1st.
about it. Is it May 1st?
yeah,
Okay.
I was thinking CPC on the second, I've got to think May 1st on the first.
So May 1st, and this sort of was going to come in down the line, but since May 1st, the architects are coming back to show us what they have.
Okay.
I don't know if that's something everybody wants to come to, or they want to present it to us, and we can sort of condense it for you, as opposed to, scheduling our joint meeting on that day, maybe.
Okay. Maybe we should
Just
adjust
a
it.
thought.
But I think it would be productive, any member of this committee that wanted to come in and
Yeah.
watch the presentation.
Absolutely.
That would be helpful, and then you and I can figure out another time we can do goals
Mm-hmm.
and objectives, okay?
What time are the architects?
4:30. Our meetings are typically 4:30.
Okay. Yeah, I thought this started at 4:30.
If you saw our agenda, it said 4:30, so we'll forgive you.
All right, so this is something that's moving. It started before the trust actually was created and appointed. The committee has been working on it with George and now architects and with the permission of Cape Cod 5, and I think the discussions have been productive and the relationship is solid, so let's move on to some other items.
Okay.
George?
Old Tavern Motel, we all know what that is. Having fallen in love with the property, I'm sorry to report it is under agreement. It is not yet conveyed to a buyer, but there's a buyer who intends to continue to operate a motel there. So if it falls through, we can go back and look at it. Had it not fallen through, I probably would have asked for your consideration of some trust money on the order of $25,000, give or take, to do the same kind of study on this property as we're doing on Cape Cod 5. I just, we can all do our desktop evaluations, you got a lot of, capacity here between the assembled expertise, but to have a professional come in and look at a property and give us what can you do on the property quickly and definitively is really valuable. To that extent, I actually talked to Ted Malone of Provincetowns, is it community housing resource, yeah. Ted is a real good builder. He knows how to develop affordable housing. He's got a lot of big projects going on. I asked him if he would be willing to spend some time to be able to give us on an hourly basis a quick review of any properties, because there's a lot of options out there, a lot of opportunities, a lot of things to think about. We haven't got goals defined, but it'd be nice to have somebody who could, for $120 an hour, spend a couple hours and look at a property and within a day or a week, give us an idea. Is this a go or no-go? Absolutely. It seems like a good person to have on retainer. So if, I'm seeing some heads kind of nod, if you want me to kind of pursue that and see if we can get a little closer to an agreement on that, it doesn't obligate you to any spending, maybe I'll do that.
Do we have any process that, does the town have a process whereby it has to be bid? Who can get a job like that?
It depends on the size, and that's not required in this one.
This would be well under the threshold for any bidding, it's just good business practices.
Yeah, it's just.
So I think what George is asking, should he continue to have discussions with Ted to see if we can go somewhere? Okay?
Yeah.
Consensus is yes?
Yeah.
I'm kind of hearing a consensus, I don't need a vote or anything on it. 85 Bakers Pond Road, this is a 2.9 acre parcel with an Atlantic white cedar swamp on part of it. It's right next to Route 6. The town actually owns a little piece of abutting property that we probably acquired through tax sale. Probably, I doubt it's even been foreclosed and cleaned up yet. The property was available, it's been taken off the market. In my mind, there are some title questions on this piece of property. So if it does come up again, the price is in a reasonable area, we should continue to look at it. If it's possible to combine some town land adjacent to it, we have a little leg up to put a little more housing on the property than somebody else might be able to do privately.
What's the combined size? I'm sorry.
It's 2.88 currently, and then the town owns about,
2.4, I think.
was it?
2.4, I think.
Town owns 2.4? Yeah, but it's in a
Most of it's in the
long
swamp.
configuration that doesn't, it's not as useful as 2.4 sounds. But maybe you can get 3 full 40,000 square foot building lots out of that, something like that.
What was the price of the property?
I think it was 189 for half of it. The half that contained the cedar swamp, but had a building lot. It's never been carved out yet
Right.
formally. Should I move on? Habitat for Humanity Concepts, 16 Old Timers Lane is that 29,000 square foot buildable lot. Talked to Habitat. They would be very interested in acquiring a lot for a single. They would program it in immediately. It's probably a year to 18 months out for construction start, as all their projects are. This is limited to 2 bedrooms. There's nothing to preclude Habitat from seeking a relief for the 700 square feet of lot area to be able to put a 3rd bedroom on for an affordable housing project. Sounds like a reasonable ask from where I sit, but you would need a variance from the Board of Health for that.
How would you get the affordable unit on it? Wouldn't you need a variance from the zoning board of appeals as well?
It's a building lot, so it's a building lot for a 2-bedroom house.
Right.
It's free and clear, it's ready to go.
But the affordable housing, or the accessory housing says 40,000 square feet for a separate unit.
Oh, this is a vacant lot, that it would have one single-family house constructed on it by
Okay.
Habitat, so there would be no
So
accessory unit.
no, okay.
Right. I know we had a previous discussion about accessory units on
Right.
single families.
And that there should be, we should work toward a zoning change on that particular, to lower the size of the lot necessary.
We
That-
are.
Right now, it's 40,000 square feet.
Yes,
Buildable
there's-
upland.
I'm glad you said that. There's an article coming up at town meeting to lower it to 30 to allow an accessory unit. And that throws about 500 parcels into the mix that could be used for accessories. I'll say probably 150 of them could be reasonably used because there are wetlands and other things that take away from buildable upland. So I think it's a marginal but useful increase.
Okay, good.
What would you
And-
need to do to move that forward?
Well, I was just going to add, as we did discuss this property at our last meeting, and was recommended that we ask that you strongly consider a purchase of that property to transfer it over to Habitat. So that was one of the recommendations we did want to make to you guys today.
Thoughts on this side of the table? Board?
I'm going to go to Henry's question. So original question was, this would fall under a single-family, 3-bedroom
Ownership.
ownership, all right, and would it meet it would have to be sold to meet the affordability?
Habitat has, up until now, only built homes for people at 65% of median income or lower. They just have increased that number to 80%. So this is a family of 4 making $75,000. They're out there in the town.
Oh,
How
yeah.
much is the lot?
It's listed at $225,000.
And Habitat builds it for free?
Habitat may go to the CPC and say, if you can give us $50,000, we can get the house started. That's something like that. That is outside our control. Or they could ask you for some trust funds to start it. It's a fairly high cost for a single unit, but it does get one moving right along in the queue.
So when you say started, what is that? 225 for the lot, and then how much more to build it?
I don't know.
I mean, I think the point is that once you convey it to Habitat, it's theirs to put a house on, and how they go about getting the funding. They may come back here, they may go to CPC, but how the funds are raised to do it is their purview.
So if we wanted to start this process, the trust could take action to request George, acting in our behalf, to see if there is an opportunity for a purchase. In other words, negotiate the price and see whether or not it's something that we'd want to do. And we can't take action to consummate the deal tonight, but I think we have enough information on our relative agendas that we could ask George to see what happens if he went and negotiated with the seller.
Question, how long has it been listed?
180 days, somewhere in that range.
Okay.
It's not a quick one. I think people look at the two-bedroom limit and they look elsewhere. That's a big threshold.
The idea of having him pursue it and is, I think it's a good one. I am interested in how a proposal for a significant expenditure by this board is presented, is packaged. I think it would be helpful to have some components that we could expect and count on, including, the relationship to our goals and the impact on our financial base if we were to make this. And I think it would be helpful to have that in advance of the meeting so that we could, scratch our heads over it.
So it's a two-step process. One, we could ask George to proceed to see if it's still on the market and what it could be acquired for, and then come back to us, having talked to Habitat, understanding exactly what they would require, what their time schedule might be, and so forth. And then this trust could then decide, is this something that we want to expend funds on? Two-step process.
Right. And I'm saying it would be helpful if what George came back to this trust with was
Yes.
an actionable proposal that we had seen beforehand.
Yep. Yep.
How many square feet is it?
So 29.3.
So I found one here, it is sold for 46,000 square feet on 3 Uncle Israel Road,
Right in the corner of Route 28.
for 249. And this one's 225?
Right.
2 bedroom.
Yes.
And the one on the corner of Uncle Israel's,
4 bedroom, 4 bedroom.
yeah, but it was a fire
Yeah.
4 years ago, as I remember, and it sat there. It's been on the market for 2 years now, I think, something like that. Yeah,
So I
so
don't know what's in the ground. It would have to be dealt with, I'm not sure.
I think they took everything out, but,
Oh,
so,
it's a house? I thought it was just a lot.
no, it's a
It
lot
is a
now,
lot.
but it was a house that
house.
burned.
What is rhododendrons that are.
Yeah,
mature
you
and
can't see it
everything.
anymore, you drive by it every day, George.
Is the access for it on 28?
No, it's around the corner on the side street.
And I know that the 225, the asking price does seem fairly high for a single unit, but I'll remind you, the most recent unit we did was a one-bedroom rental, and it cost the town about $125,000,
140.
140. So
You're
just putting it in
talking-
perspective that this
You're
is a
talking construction
three-bedroom.
costs versus land costs
Yeah, but hopefully the construction costs will be,
to us.
right, cost to the town.
Cost of it.
But you're
Um,
saying that the Uncle Israel one wouldn't be a good deal because of what's there?
I don't know much about that
Yeah,
property.
if no one's bought it, you may be able to go in there and offer 175. And there's a house been built on there, so there may be
A foundation or something.
an old septic system on it.
I think everything was taken out of the ground, as I remember, but.
But it's a buildable lot.
Duplex.
Yeah.
Is that- is that-
Single-family home with
is that
accessory up to
too big?
800
Is
square
that
feet.
just not marketable for a 4-bedroom?
No, it's still
So why
marketable, it's
not?
just a
Yeah.
different class of deed, sure.
Or could it be two-bedroom townhouses?
You cannot do that in a single-family residential district.
That's why we have you.
If you need to know, I'll give you one.
I'm sorry, is that property still listed for sale?
I don't know, I got
think-
Yeah.
Zillow.
What's the address?
Three on
Three on
Otis Road.
Otis Road.
So-
Zillow, as long as you know that.
So-
Anything over 400,000.
Do we?
Mr. Chairman, I'm a little bit confused, though, as to what we were sending, or we would be sending George to do. In other words, ordinarily, you start a deal with a written offer. So it's kind of, I mean, from the standpoint of somebody paying attention to you, that's ordinarily how you do it. And we're not at that stage at this point in time. I don't know how we get from here to there.
If I may, I think it might be preferable if I were to contact Habitat and say, and relay this conversation that you're interested and willing to entertain supporting the purchase of a lot, and see if Habitat wants to make the direct connection there. The property goes from the current owner to Habitat with the town as the enabler for it to happen. And so we don't have to go into executive session to negotiate on a single lot. And as you know, that just draws out the timetable. Not that we're under duress now, but we've already seen the properties come and go. Does that make better sense to
All right,
contact
so
Habitat?
I move that we authorize George to make that contact with Habitat for Humanity for the purpose of discussing or coming to a deal with Habitat for Humanity whereby we provide the financing to purchase the lot and Habitat promises to build a house on the property.
Okay, motion, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Further discussion beyond what we've already fit. Matt?
Do we want to limit the scope to just the one property or both?
As in either?
Right,
Yeah.
yeah,
Both being
Oh.
Uncle Israel.
right.
Yeah. Is that all right with you, Dewey, to look at both? mean, it's-
Well, I'm not, I don't like necessarily talking about these details in public, but I'm aware of the fact that the Uncle Israel's property is within a subdivision. We discussed in our earlier meeting about the fact that at some time you can have problems with the residential neighborhoods just because people think that they're going to begin selling illegally marijuana out of and that kind of thing. So that's one point. The other point is that the site that's priced at $225,000 is tucked away and would not be subject to the same kind of problem. So I'm not sure that I want to authorize it either or. I would need to know more about the Uncle Israel's property, and I don't think it fits as well.
Yeah.
I mean, so that's my personal opinion.
Perhaps not as a Habitat house, but does it address the issue we were talking about earlier of the people who are at 120% of median income and, you know, maybe can we find some way to buy the property and subsidize it in a way that would help them to buy it and have home ownership, or even to use it for a rental property, moving towards home ownership. But it seems like it's a good lot at a good price that's not selling, and it's in a neighborhood where it doesn't have to be lower income. It can be more like the rest of the neighborhood.
But correct me if I'm wrong, if it is 100, if you are saying 120%, I don't know that we
We
can
can't
use
finance
these
that,
funds for
yeah.
it at this point.
Oh, okay.
It would
Because of
have
our
to be up
previous
to
conversation
100%.
about-
Trust funds,
Yeah.
Right.
got it, okay.
We could do 100%.
Yeah.
The interesting thing about that lot is it's large enough to do uncommon housing, right? So you could do a 3-bedroom unit with a 1-bedroom. So now you're providing, you know, in the for sale case, a rental income opportunity for the buyer, or in the rental case, 2 units at once.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I'm not foreclosing the deal with regard to the Uncle Israel's property. I'm just saying, I kind of want to start with this baby step.
Yeah.
Relative to this particular property, so we can move on something. I mean, there's a general sense that we should show our flag if we, in this, we discussed this type of deal earlier, it's a model that works, can get our feet wet. I don't have a problem with pursuing the other one for the points that you make. They're excellent points, which is, it's a different market that you're serving, and 4 bedrooms versus 1 bedroom. Actually, you could have 5 bedrooms, couldn't you? Or, no, 4 bedrooms, it's a septic
Yeah,
It was a standard
location.
septic for.
Yeah,
And-
So 3
and
bedroom
there-
and-
There's a 5-bedroom septic in place on the property, but they're advertising it as being limited to 4 bedrooms, presumably because of the amount of time that's gone by since the place has burned down and the lot size, right?
well, we might be able to jiggle that, that particular, based upon the type of project it is, but. So I think it has promise, that Uncle Israel.
Hey, George, if you were to go the 3-bedroom main house, 1-bedroom ADU, property would be deed restricted.
Yes, deed restricted affordable, sure.
So would that, if you were to, whoever owns the property, that rental would have to also be.
Yeah, it's a problem.
I would think so.
I
Haven't
would
done it
think so
yet.
too, I just hadn't really thought about that before, but it's almost 2 birds with 1 stone.
Well, then you'd be requiring a new home buyer to income qualify their renter and take on all the other responsibilities of rental management for their single unit. I'm not saying it's not useful, but, there's additional responsibility there.
Sure. But there's help out there for that too.
But then again, do they income qualify if they're gonna be getting $700 for a rental property on top of the income they're already making based on?
Is that income qualification?
There's a lot of complexity.
Just saying.
Looking forward, or
I'm
where
just
you
saying.
are at a moment?
It's hard, I would say it's hard to not, I don't know, and this isn't my forte, but I would say it's hard to not look at it when it's part of the deal.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
George,
I
educate us,
understand.
Yeah.
educate us with regard to that, the extra unit, the uncommon housing. There's not automatically an income qualifier for that, is there?
No, just zoning allows any conforming lot to have a accessory unit, as many bedrooms as you can stand, up to 800 square feet total floor area. One of the units needs to be owner occupied, and the other one rented on an annual basis. And it has to meet Title V and all that other stuff. So those are the basic requirements, and it's a by right, you don't have to go to the Board of Appeals or anything.
Is that anywhere in Orleans?
In the in any of the residential districts, right?
So what's the part about income qualifying, that the ADU is not affordable?
If you were putting a community or trust funds into such a unit, then you'd want to get a deed restriction to make sure it's affordable, I would think.
I think
Oh, right, right,
you'd
right.
have to, I think, yeah.
Although I could make a pretty compelling argument that you're not really making a lot of money on that ADU if you're renting it at affordable rates. Profit.
Right,
Okay, we started out on
yeah.
old timers.
We are getting off base.
And why don't we come back and focus on old timers, and then we can go back to Uncle Israel's. So I think what I heard was, and I can't even remember if we had a motion at this point.
We did, but then it got sidetracked, so maybe we should
Let's come
repeat
back
it.
to the basic motion. Do we want George to proceed and talk to Habitat about doing something on 3 Old Timers Lane? Is there any further discussion on that? If not, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, not voting. That's unanimous.
We'll follow that. I think.
Okay. Now, at this meeting, do we want to have any more discussion about 3 Uncle Israels?
Well, before we go,
Go ahead.
before we go to that, just talking about, and I think I'm repeating Dewey's question, but what are the mechanisms in the step forward to purchase? So as I understand it, if George has a positive conversation with Habitat and all sounds good, then we need to agree that we want to move forward on that property. Then we have to go to the selectmen.
We will have to, have a meeting post it within 48 hours, and we can go ahead without going to the selectmen, I believe.
I would encourage, if Habitat contacts the seller and has what they think is a deal, that they submit a proposal to you requesting funds, and then you deal with it.
Yeah.
Doesn't that seem like a good start?
Okay.
So they would make the offer, not us.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering whether we should talk about any theoreticals, and I don't know if we want to allow a month to toll here without some sort of direction on how we want to
I
move forward.
I hope
Agreed.
that George will do it fairly
You know,
quickly.
Right, but
And
should we
Habitat will-
authorize George up to a certain amount, that if there's traction and it works, and
That's kind of tough to talk about numbers in
Yeah.
public.
right? So do we want, what would be the mechanism, an emergency meeting of this
Well,
board?
not emergency, we just post it in 48 hours, we have a meeting
Okay.
to take action.
Presumably, if there were an offer made by Habitat for Humanity, it would be subject to this mechanism coming through. So they're gonna get best price. When that deal comes back to us, we can't go into executive session, right? It's a take it or leave it,
The proposal to you to discuss and decide whether it makes sense.
whether we're gonna buy it
Yep.
at that price.
Yep.
Right. So you can do
But
it all in
after,
open session.
after that price comes out, you know, the negotiation is in public view,
That's
so,
right,
it-
yeah.
you know, it's kind of risky for the seller.
So we're letting Habitat do the bidding in this case?
Hopefully.
We'll have to let
If
them
they're
know.
willing, if they're willing. But
Katie, go
for
ahead.
future reference, it might just be nice for us to know exactly how a offer to purchase would look like from you guys.
Okay?
Well, does Habitat for Humanity have any sort of guidelines with regard to that? In other words, this procedure, is it laid out in any one of their documents that could be shared with?
Maybe not in the simplest form, but any proposal that they have to you would be robust with how they would structure the project, how they qualify people, who gets the home, and the sweat equity, and what they're left with remaining. I take care of it.
Yeah, and I think the important thing for the trust and the committee is, this is the first time in recent years that we have sat down and had a conversation with Habitat. And it would be nice for all of us to understand the mechanism that they go through. The last time we did it was, George, I think Bevan's Way, and the deal was simple. They had gone out and bought the property, they asked us for $600,000 to help them purchase it, and they took care of all the rest.
Yes.
So,
Very clean for us.
it's very clean for us, just a big check.
Big check.
Okay,
Can I recognize Meth?
you sure can. As a matter of fact, you should jump in more often. We have sort of this
My
co-meeting.
question on this discussion is whether there's any opportunity to put in a local preference component.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the answer is.
Let's express that. There's a specific marketing plan Habitat has had approved through DHCD, so the units count on your affordable housing inventory. They'll have to follow that, but I'm sure there is a local preference in there. I'd be very surprised if there was not.
Yeah, Fred?
Just noticing our time and our agenda. I was wondering if it makes sense to move forward and talk about number E, so that we have sufficient time to actually talk about that, because I think it's really important to figure out how our two groups work together.
That is what we mostly prepared for this meeting.
That's why you assumed the chairmanship of this joint meeting right now. You handle it.
So, yeah, I mean, we took a considerable amount of time sort of reviewing our thought process of when we asked to have the trust created, and just a little bit of background. Originally, the Board of Selectmen wanted to make the committee the trust, and we specifically asked them not to do that. We thought that there was two distinct roles, and we sort of just kind of rekindled that conversation during our last meeting, and I'm going to reiterate for you. I mean, before I get into anything, this is obviously our thought process, our interpretation, but we obviously want to be as supportive as possible of the creation of affordable housing. So obviously, we are welcome your thoughts and criticisms or comments or whatever they may be. But essentially, the way we envision this relationship working is The Affordable Housing Committee would continue to do sort of the research, the recon, the scouting, the creating opportunities or trying to create opportunities. We were hoping that we would be more of the, we would tee up the opportunities that we could bring to you and present to you for consideration. While the trust was obviously, they had the money. They're the purse strings. They could evaluate the projects with your expertise and decide which ones were viable and which weren't. We are certainly more than willing to continue to do that background work. And if you guys have ideas of projects, certainly let us know, and we could tee those up for you as well. So I think that's the basic model of how we figured that this would work. As far as the fundraising goes, because we've touched on that a bit, I don't think that that was necessarily something we were thinking would be a responsibility of ours, as we kind of saw that under the purse strings umbrella. But on the other hand, education was something that we thought we would also have a hand in as well. So with that basic idea in hand, that's what we were thinking the roles of either committee and the trust would be. Thoughts?
Alexis, were you raising your hand or just?
I think she was pulling that right back quick.
Pulling the main sheet.
I think that that's, I mean, one of the reasons that I got up to speak at town meeting last year was what, you know, for the creation of the trust board, because like you said, you know, there's two distinct roles, and it's so, as we've seen, it's so hard to get through everything that we think of and that we wanna do. So collaborating, but then also dividing to take on separate roles, I think is prudent, and is what we should be doing, and having these joint meetings is also necessary, just to, when you guys have new projects that you found, or we've made progress once we figure out what our plan is with how we, you know, with the next step with approaching Habitat or the town or whomever with purchase options or anything like that. I think that's where we come back together, but I think that you said it pretty succinctly and pretty eloquently.
Thank you.
You were great at town meeting, by the way. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
We were all ready to go, but we didn't have to. So that worked out really well for all of us.
Hopefully they don't have to do it again.
So you know, if you are comfortable with those sort of separate roles, then that just leaves us back to the goals conversation and what are the specific avenues that you'd like us to pursue for you? I mean, obviously Cape Cod 5 is out there. Unfortunately, with the Old Tavern Motel, we were going to request additional funds to do a feasibility study for that, but that sort of has gotten away from us. So we are still looking at other opportunities to present to you, but obviously looking for any kind of guidance from you.
So what about that lifeguard program?
You know,
So
it is.
there's one unit, well, it's like 2 units in each. One of the buildings is firmly in the flood zone, and that's the one not being used, I believe. So if you want to rehab that, you got to bring if you exceed 30% of the value of the property, you got to bring the floor up to above the flood zone level. So I'm not sure that's cost effective. And then there's the political issue of creating affordable housing within 100 yards of the beach, you know. There's a sensitivity to that I'm not sure you want to go in that direction. Plus, we need it for public employee housing in the
Yeah.
summer.
So it's being used now?
Yes.
It's used during the summer season. Lifeguard, a family lives in there, one of the lifeguard's families lives in there. And then the so the building is split into 2 units. A family lives in one unit and then 3 lifeguards live in the other one, and then the other building is vacant.
And on that chart, what about that motel that, I don't know what happened with it, owned by National Seashore?
No.
Oh, the Nauset Knolls, there were two, the town submitted a proposal. There were 2 proposals that were submitted by motel operators, and we were told Friday that the National Park Service is evaluating those 2 proposals.
Wasn't the money, their revised number
Was,
a ridiculous number?
yeah, and that's one of the reasons we didn't respond, because it was not, it's counterproductive.
You're bringing that up, makes me think we need a communication pattern. Because, yes, we're doing the initial project development and the hunting and that kind of thing. But that doesn't exclude you guys from doing that as well. And so I think that if we are going to all be kind of keeping our eyes open for things, that we need to feed my suggestion would be that we feed the information to George, and that you do with it what is appropriate and bring it back appropriately to either or both committees. But
Sure.
that we not just all be helter-skelter over there contacting people and looking at sites.
And, yeah, and I totally agree. I think a point of contact is great. I don't want to throw a lot of stuff at you.
No, it's actually very interesting to get an idea, and somebody thinks, what can you do with it? And I can run it through the zoning mill. I got 20 years of experience in this. And so I can do the initial reconnaissance and bring it back to you. That's
We
not a
talked
problem.
about last time, how do we know it's coming to foreclosures?
Well, it's on the agenda. We'll get to it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes,
I just wanted to follow that comment up. I understand the model, which is that the AHC continues to do what they do, and that we are a board that essentially is involved in finance. But I think we're a fledgling creature at this point in time, and that I don't know where we may go in the future. So I just want to put a marker down to say, well, that does not mean that we are excluded from other activities that might, our obligation under the circumstances would be to keep the AHC completely briefed, and also to use their resources. So I just want to be clear on that it's not as simple a model as just, well, that's it, okay. We can all, half of us could all go home if that was the case. So.
Could I follow on that? I thought that one of the words that, the balance of the two things made sense as presented, but one of the words that, spilled out was separate functions. And I think there are overlaps, and that's why the communication part is important. Take something like education, marketing, and fundraising. They have to go together. You're not going to be raising money if you don't have your case and your materials and your, so it's obvious point, but I would worry about a kind of ironclad agreement that said, that's yours and this is mine, and stay away and don't step on mine, and
I guess we can call them guidelines.
Yeah.
collaboration.
I would suggest that we don't necessarily make hard and fast rules at this point, and that we evolve together with a general understanding. We don't have anything written down that says you need to do this, that, and the other thing, but I would like for us to agree that we communicate through George, and I do think that that's something we should have.
I'm comfortable with that if George is, so I think that's a great idea, Fran, thank you.
I will collect information as it comes in.
Okay. The other thought we had about communication, I think Fran, you mentioned this as well, is it may be beneficial to have a member, when we don't do the joint meetings, maybe having a member from either committee at ours or us at yours.
Yeah.
We had sort of decided that someone would be at your meetings when they weren't joint, which brought us to a problem in that you have conveniently scheduled them at the same time. That be that as it may. We all said we're flexible to change ours, even though we were here first. Just a thought that we may want to think about different times.
As we're learning how to work with each other. Straighten that out. Okay,
So, just a thought for future reference.
okay. Yes.
I think that the other thing we talked about also was to share minutes of the separate meetings.
Yes.
So that both sides are
We can
informed.
do that. Minutes and agendas.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, I'm just watching the clock here, since some of us have to leave here in a little while, but can we go back to distressed properties, George, and mailing list that you put together?
Yeah, to be quick, actually. Here's your full list of all the tax distressed properties in Orleans that need to be distressed for other reasons. Pass it around, there's only about a dozen.
How
Um,
delinquent?
Put a date on there? No dates. So, there's some land.
Or is that the date of how delinquent that might be?
That was the year that, so when a property is tax delinquent, the town puts it in a bin that's delinquent, and they get charged 8% per year on that delinquent tax money. The town always makes out on this, so.
Is that beyond, I guess, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but are you delinquent at 30 days, at 60?
I don't know.
Okay,
But we take no action at least for 2 years.
okay.
And I'm not sure there's been any action on actual projects. After 2 years, the treasurer will put out notice of intent to, take further action, and that's when, there are some people, as I'm told, this is just anecdotal from the treasurer who's been there about 2 years now. There are some people who just let their taxes lapse until the last possible moment, for whatever reason. There are a couple, does yellow say houses or seasonal house?
Second homeowner, yeah.
Yeah, so there are two second homeowners. And they just let their taxes go until the last second. Could you contact them and say, you don't seem to use your house very much, it's in arrears, we'd be willing to, find some way to purchase it. That's a possibility. The parcels of land that are out there, they're not all, like, there's a dozen properties on there, they're not all valuable. Some of them have very little value, little squibs in the edge of open space in subdivisions, things like that, wetland properties that are marginally developable. The message is slim pickings. I don't think you're gonna find much out of that in a town such as this one with relatively good property values. So, should we move on to the next issue? And you just pass that around as go. I just like it back eventually.
One of these says Orleans Conservation.
Hey.
What was that one?
I have to look at it. Actually, there's a map of all the significant dollar values. There's a map that goes with each address attached to that, so.
I have one here that says 55 Old Colony Way, it's on the same list. It says foreclosure. That wouldn't, they may have paid their taxes on time, but it's still the bank.
They haven't paid the
That's
bank.
a bank foreclosure, it's not a tax foreclosure. There is one tax foreclosure on there that's a condo in Somerset. It's actually listed for sale right now, so I think the owner's finally trying to get out from under it. It might not be a good idea to go after year-round residents who are having tax trouble. So, we'll move on to the next issue, and that is the list of seasonal homes valued under $500,000. There are 536 of such items in the town of Orleans. That's a lot more than I thought. So I have a spreadsheet with all the addresses, and I have mailing labels that I can print out anytime. If you want to do some outreach, write a letter. I would suggest you go with a firm like Curly Direct over in Dennis. They're really cost effective. You'd probably get these out for something like 50 to 75 cents a letter or something like that. They're very cheap through their bulk mail. So that's done. It's ready to go whenever you decide you want to make some sort of contact with people.
So George, this was a follow-up to the program that HAC is promoting? Is
This
that-
was not. So HAC has this program called with
360.
Cape 365.
Red 365.
Okay, where they contact seasonal owners and say, would you rent your house on an annual basis instead of a short-term rental basis? Figuring that a week of rent in the summer is equal to a month of rent in the winter, it all washes out, you make the same money and you only have one tenant to worry about. The HAC's goal was 25 units on the Cape this year, they've got 15 already. So it's been a decent program. I don't know if there's been any kind of major contact like this could do with the seasonal owners in Orleans, but it might be worth the effort. So I think if you want to move forward, you need one or two members to carefully craft a letter that says exactly what you want to say and only what you want to say.
Do we know these 536, they're summer rentals, or are they winterized?
These are seasonally occupied homes. We only know that because they pay personal property tax on the contents of the dwelling. That's the only surrogate we have for that. Some may not be year-round. Yeah.
I think that that's something that we need to look at seriously. I mean, just driving around town, it's so frustrating as a young person who's looking for housing, seeing all of these houses. I mean, you drive by and there's only people there a couple of months at the best. And then, you know, we had a $3.5 million house next to mine. The people were there 2 weeks out of the summer, and that was it. And they just sat there. And it's so frustrating, especially, you know, this new campaign that the CDP's running. You guys were talking about the firemen earlier. There's housing, there's houses available, but it's been gobbled up by people who aren't using it. And
The timing may be right, because I was at a dinner party on Saturday night, and two people there have these rental companies. One is pretty picky.
Oh, pretty picky.
And then another one, and they said the rentals are slow. Now, they have I understand they have high-end rentals, but they said that they're like 50% of where they were last year at this time.
Summer rentals.
Summer rentals,
Right.
yeah. And they started to talk about blaming the tax law, that, give me a break, $300 for someone's paying $8,000 a week.
Would these homes then qualify perhaps for the ACT program?
Which pays $1,000 for anybody who signs up.
So if we were to write a letter, included in that letter might mention that program.
Sure.
It may be worth collaborating with
Absolutely.
PAC on that, if we're gonna put their something on there. But yeah, my understanding of the program is it's anybody who hasn't previously rented year-round. So whether it's they're newly renting it, or it's a summer rental that they're converting to fully time, there's no income qualification required.
Right, it's just get into year-round rental.
They're leaving it to the market to determine what you can get for rent. And they'll cut you a check for $1,000.
I'm just pulling back on the reins a second here around the idea of a letter that goes to 536 people. That's a pretty big public splash, well subject to misinterpretation, kind of thing that could trigger reactions. It wouldn't take too many people to get their nose out of joint for some reason or another because they got this letter. Who are these people? And we would be, I think, backpedaling in response. And I'm wondering whether there would be a way to, is there a way to be in touch with a subset on a feeler kind of basis before a letter went out, and where there was a conversation that talked about, you know, the mission of this affordable housing effort, and, you know, didn't go right at them, sort of saying, give us your house. And because the reason I'm pulling back on it was 536, and also I think it would be rolling a little, people would say, how did you get my name? And, you know, what's the town doing, giving us this information out? And, you know, my political antenna go up on that one.
Mr. Chairman?
Dewey?
I guess I'm confused. These are 536 pieces of property that are occupied by people who, it's not their primary residence, right?
Correct.
Okay. So what's the theme in writing to the letter to the person and say, are you interested in renting your house year-round? If you are, we can get you $1,000. That's essentially the deal?
That's, yeah, I think that's
Well,
that's
I
the
mean,
pitch.
it strikes me, just following up on what Ward says, is I have this house. Somebody writes me, I mean, presumably I'm using it, happily using it for whatever so the thing about renting it year-round is it's not available for the owner. So it's the primary purpose for which the expensive asset was acquired can't be met. I mean, I don't know.
I think there are times of life when people just don't use the home that's there. And Elisa Galazzi said that there is at least one case where they struck a 50-week rental deal, and the homeowner comes down for prime 2 weeks that they wanted.
That's
It's kind of a
interesting.
nice workout.
That's interesting.
So, yeah, is there a way to, I mean, I don't know how we would do this, but is there a way to do more research and target people like that who, you know, are maybe only here for a month, or, I don't know how we would do it, whether it's like, do they actually get their beach sticker? We
Yeah.
have that
If
on
we had
record.
monthly electric bills or something, we might be able to do that, but.
But soon they're gonna
Well,
have to
so,
be,
so the list of 536 is every
Just trying to
property
get
under that
rentals
value,
up
right?
Yeah,
So
so
if we
every,
look-
every seasonal property under that value.
Oh, so that is seasonal
And
only?
everybody who pays personal property tax, so that it's not their primary residence, who owns a house under that value.
Oh, wow, I thought it was everything.
For
Okay.
sure, common sense is the majority of those are people that bought those for rentals, and they're not being used even by
I
them.
don't know, or they just
I
own
don't
them through
know.
some
I mean, I
family
No,
title
they
or
could be
something.
rented, right?
or they could be
I don't see
renting
what
them
we-
and
I don't see
keeping
what
2
we
weeks
have
for
to lose.
themselves.
I mean, I don't rent my house, and I get letters from those rental companies all the time, and not once did I think, did the town give them my name? It's public information. They said, this is, you know, this is how what we think we can rent your house for, why don't you rent it?
But, Mr. Chairman, this is coming from us, a town, Oregon. So, you know, that's, and we're basically, I mean, I'm sort of flabbergasted that people buy property just for rentals. Why don't we go and write letters to the people who put those signs out front that says they're seasonal rentals? I mean,
That makes more sense to me.
I-
And that's who we're targeting, right?
rather than a no-lose, I think it's a no-win. Again, I don't think, what kind of return? 2 people? I mean, 5 people, 10 people?
And I really agree with what Ward was saying. I think that if we're gonna make a splash, we need to establish ourselves first.
Yeah.
To lead with this publicly, I think really would be a mistake. I do think we wanna do something along the lines of feeling out opportunities, but a letter, I would be in favor of that.
Maybe just send them a
Wouldn't it
letter
be
with $1,000 check.
Call if you want more. You want to talk some more.
Can a rental agent, or I don't know how this
Could-
got, send a letter, doesn't matter.
Or hack.
Could hack to it?
Sure.
Cause
If
then
they're
it's not
willing.
coming from us,
Wouldn't
but
it be part of our education program as opposed to an activity where we're going to be sending out a letter? This is part of what we're talking about, is trying to inform the people what is going on. This is an interesting option. I was interested in it. Katie was interested in it. Some people have been interested because they read it in the newspaper or they heard about it from someone. So maybe this is part of our educational role as opposed to our, try to get some property on the books right at this point in time. And I think that that would be one of the pieces we could work on together.
I think Alexis made an interesting comment, cross-tabbing this with beach stickers. So if the owner is going to use the house, they're going to get a beach sticker when they come to Orleans,
Yeah.
even if it's only for 2 weeks. So if we,
we have records of all of that.
yeah, exactly, and so you cross-tab it, and how many of these houses don't have beach stickers or transfer station stickers? Those are the ones that are not getting used by the owners in all probability. I guess you could cross-tab it with Nauset disposal pickup too, but you know, what you want to do is get down to the ones that are not being used by the owner and presumably are not being rented somehow. So you want to get down from 536.
But are you really not wanting to get the ones that aren't being rented? I mean, even if they're being rented seasonally, because right now I'm thinking of all of the properties that have been bought by, what is it, Nauset Rentals or whatever it is, that are here and they're under $500,000 and they're buying them and then they're renting them for a couple $1,000s a week, but they're only renting them for 12 weeks. Is that going to target those houses too? Because it would be great if that company turned around and started renting their houses year-round as opposed to weekly.
I think that, I agree, I think that that's, you know, that's the market we want, is the people who are doing the short-term rentals. That, not that we want to take it away, but that's.
Were there, that, Yeah, our concept is competition to their model, right?
Right.
I'm pretty sure they are a broker and they don't own any of those properties, right? They're a service provider to the homeowner.
You think so?
The same way that the Hack 365 program is. So basically, those two programs are competing.
Okay.
So, like what Alan and I were talking about is, I agree with Ward and Dewey, we don't want this to be the first thing we do, and we don't want to seem like we're infringing on people's privacy, going after their property, but making it public that, or putting it out there that, this is an option of supporting our goal of, we have all of these homes that are used only partially out of the summer, even if, they did a 52 or a 50-week rental, if we could do a 48-week rental, or, something like that. Because there are so many homes that are just sitting there. And it's taking away land from people who wanna build in this town, it's taking away houses from people who wanna build in this town. And these people live in DC, they live in wherever, they come up for 2 weeks in the summer, they're not buying their year-round groceries here, they're not buying their gas here, they're not going to these restaurants except for a couple weeks in the summertime. And it's affecting us.
Matt Franion?
Just for information, a lot of these properties that you're talking about, especially the ones that have the perpetual signs in front, they're being rented 2 nights, 3 nights, 4 nights. It's not your traditional weekly rental that everybody sort of has in their minds for what's happening on Cape Cod. It's almost like a distributed motel business, being run from a central spot. So, I'm not saying that it's not worth pursuing, it's just, these people are operating in a way that we're not really all that used to.
Mr. Chairman?
Dewey?
To me, the concept of someone who has a property that they use seasonally, being interested in kind of blindly renting it to an unknown person, you're talking about somebody's second home, so they presumably they have valuable personal property. I mean, it's just, I hearken to something that Henry said earlier, which is we have a big educational job on our hands. Most of the people in this town, most of the voters in this town are not, I don't think they understand the scope of the problem that we have here. I think we need to build a case that this problem that we have is existential. And I don't think, at this point in time, I don't think it's well understood what kind of situation that we have. And the people who live in the town and vote in the town are not stakeholders with regard to this. We have an awful lot of second homes, and that's a little off the beaten path with regard to writing a letter to renters.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Looking at
Greg.
our seasonal, our tourist economy, where are the people that come for a week, say a family of 4 or 5, and hundreds of homes in New Orleans? Are we taking away those people that would be spending money in town? I mean, I'm thinking of the Chamber of Commerce and that whole aspect.
So I think, at least for me, we're getting our signals crossed. I'm not talking about houses that are being used for short-term rentals, like, Luke Chapman's business or Nauset Rentals or anything like that. I'm not talking about any of those, because those are necessary for our tourist economy. People will come down for 2 weeks and they buy a 2-week parking pass for the beach and they go out to the restaurants and they buy their groceries. I'm talking about houses that are not being rented at all. People own them and they're sitting there.
To be honest, I think it's somewhere in the middle. I think what we're looking for is a couple from both places. I think is gonna, I think it's more likely the people that aren't renting are less likely to want to turn it over.
Most people don't want their house touched.
Right. I think the people that are renting are more likely, may consider renting year-round.
So,
But
yeah, I mean,
what do I-
either
doesn't
source
mean I know
works,
anything.
and I think the idea, I think there's a lot of good ideas rattling around. The idea, if you could get 8 houses to say yes to renting year-round, well, that's 10% towards our goal of 85 rental units in the next 10 years, right? So it sounds like a small number, but if you broadcast a wide enough audience, maybe you get 8. I think that's a big number. 8 families, 8 more kids in a class. That would be amazing. But I think we do have to start with education, going back to that idea. And we need a lot of arrows in our quiver to solve this problem. Rental, converting unused houses to rentals is one important piece. ADUs, we've had that bylaw on the books for a couple years now, and it's underutilized. We need to grow awareness about that. So I think we should spend some time and develop a broader education campaign around many different tools here that we can educate homeowners in this town about, and not just focus in on one specific audience of those renting through Nauset or those not, right?
But are we kind of barking up, could we be barking up the wrong tree? Because doesn't somebody renting a house for let's say, 4 2-week periods in the summer make out better than renting a house year-round?
So I think we can talk about what's the compelling argument, but I think that the genesis, as I understand at the time, the Rent 365 campaign is look, maybe you drive down and you do the Sunday turnovers, and that sounded great when before you got into it, and now it's this hassle. How about you turn that over to us? We're going to manage it for you. Here's a $1,000 check to get started, and you'll get a rent check every month, and forget about coming down on Saturdays to flip the place. So, there's a lot of different ways to sell it.
Yeah, I don't think they're managing the rental, for what it's worth, just as a point of clarification. I think they expect the owner to still manage it, but what they are providing is a 30-minute consultation with an attorney who will help draft a lease for you as part of the program. But I don't think HAC's actually managing the year-round rental. Be great if they were, because it would be a better sell, I think.
I think they're doing more than just the lease piece, and again, the idea is hopefully to convince people that it's less work to have a year-round rental than managing the weekly turnover piece, right?
Steady, reliable income.
Right.
Tom?
I personally think letters should go out to all 536. A properly crafted letter that says, look, it's come to our attention that you may be a seasonal homeowner in Orleans. Here's an opportunity, if you so desire, to rent your house year-round. Here's a $1,000 possible kicker for you. If this doesn't interest you, if I'm a homeowner and I get that and like it, okay, I throw it away and life moves on. I'm not particularly offended by that. And I think Matt's right, that the hit rate is gonna be extraordinarily small. But even that, we're talking 1 or 2%, that does put a meaningful dent in what we're trying to do here. And it's we have a lot of ideas on different ways we can go, and this is all very new and sort of pursuing opportunities. This is one opportunity. We should try it, and doesn't foreclose on doing anything else, but we gotta start somewhere. I don't see this as being a particularly offensive path to pursue with a properly crafted letter that, we're not saying, oh, you're a horrible homeowner for not occupying. Here's an opportunity. And God knows, with 536 homeowners, we have no idea what the individual situation is for all these folks. And there will be a couple hits where they're transitioning their phases in life or whatever. And there will be a set of circumstances where this will hit home.
Is that every rental
No.
What percentage is
It's
every
not.
rental?
It's every seasonally occupied unit valued under $500,000.
Oh, under 500.
Yeah, so plenty of other ones out there. Matt Runyon?
I'm just wondering if this isn't an opportunity to craft a nice glossy stuffer and put them out with all the real estate tax bills that go out to the property owners.
All right. One alarm went off at 6, and mine just went off at 6, and two of us here have
Sorry.
to be somewhere else at 6:30. And I don't think we're going to resolve this, but George, could you get some information on what HAC has done so that we could all see that? Because they've done it, and it would be helpful to understand. And then I think it might be nice to talk to our GIS people and see what it might take to cross-tab some of the things that we talked about.
Yeah, I don't know what the database is
Yeah.
for the stickers.
Yeah, whatever, it just, okay?
And ideally even to do it for more than 1 year, because if,
Yeah.
you know, something,
Yeah.
I didn't do it this year, but that's because my wife was working, well, you know.
It goes back at least 10 years.
But I'm saying, if you had somebody who had not rented their house for more than 1 year, then, not in a sticker for more, it would be a
I'll
stronger.
tell you something, yeah. Alexis?
I think in terms of what we were talking about is communication and letting people know our message and, you know, like Dewey was saying, people are gonna be all up in arms about affordable housing and affordable tenants and all that. If people have seen the community development partnerships ad campaign, are you familiar with that? No? So the Community Development Partnership interviewed 3 young working professionals, like, somebody wanted. But it was myself as a teacher, Justin Kinshaw from Wellfleet, he's a fireman, he has a young daughter. And then I'm not familiar with the third woman, she's a nurse, or a nurse's assistant. So they put, basically it's just a newspaper ad, it's also online, if you have Facebook or you Google the Community Development Partnership, it's a face of us at our place of work, and it says, we can't afford to lose the people who can't afford to live here. And I think, and this was done through a private advertising agency, Cody and something, in Sandwich. So obviously that was pricey and whatever, but if we did something similar, not necessarily putting names to faces or anything like that, but coming up with our own way of conveying that this is what it's about. It's about people who are living here and working here, not just casually meandering through the streets of Orleans. You know, they have kids, they have families, they have jobs that support the community. So I think that as much as we need the housing, we also need the message.
It's almost 2 different messages, because to the people who live here year-round, everything we say is important. But for the majority of people who have big houses who are renting to people, it doesn't impact them. So it has to be sold to them or marketed to them that it impacts the fact that there's not, the restaurant's now closed on Monday night because we don't have enough employees because they can't find a place to live, impacts your ability to rent your property, blah, 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 blah. But they're not even here. They may not even
Right.
ever come here.
So I think something like, you know, my ad talked about being a teacher, but also being a beach director in the summer. So something like, you know, this person is a nurse, but they're also a waitress at BNI. You know, this person is a firefighter, but they're also a beach EMT. So having that, the two facets.
I get that. I'm thinking out loud about what's the messaging to the person from White Plains, New York, who rents their house in Orleans for $6,000 a week, doesn't use it. There's a lot of people like that.
Right. At some point, your rental is gonna be impacted and.
Well, how do we get that
House
message
catches
to
on fire
them?
and there's no fire.
Because guess
Right,
what?
right,
They're
right.
the
Good one.
people, maybe over some of that don't bring affordable housing to their house because they're afraid it's going to bring the value of their house down.
So may I suggest that perhaps the Affordable Housing Committee will talk about educational materials and how we might, not necessarily what's in the message, we can get to that, but finding out how we're going to convey the message and then maybe tailoring it.
Okay. All right. This has been a great discussion. Thank you all for joining, everybody. And I think, Katie, it's your meeting right now, so I'm going to ask if the Affordable Housing Trust would have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
No, the trust. We'll discuss this later.
Can we clarify our next meeting?
Yeah, Wednesday, May 1st,
Wednesday, May 1st at
4 o'clock.
4 o'clock.
Yeah,
And then are you going to join us for the
if we can.
architecture?
Yeah,
Okay.
we'd like to.
And that's at 4:30?
Yeah.
So now we're competing for this room though, so.
Well,
we'll go
we'll work that out.
Okay,
The architect's meeting's 4:30.
4:30, right?
4:30, correct,
On the 2nd.
Yeah.
correct. No, on the first, Wednesday, Wednesday, May
Trust
1st.
starts at 4.
Wednesday the first.
Doing a great job of coordinating.
Okay, I think I heard a unanimous.
And then we'll chat.
I thought I heard a unanimous vote from the trust to adjourn. The trust is adjourned. The trust is adjourned.
I will move. I'll move.
You want to adjourn too?
Yeah, did I have a motion to adjourn, Fran? Yeah, 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 I think she did.
We're adjourning.
Yeah.
Like you said, they're gonna read it.